Hi, my name is Lulu, and I read Miracleman #1 by Alan Moore and the illustration of Gary Leach. And I have read a comic book before, but I read them when I was younger, and I can't really remember where or when. Which one? Alright, so on book 1, chapter 2, I like how they start by putting in the robbers in the introduction being the robbers that come later into the book, because, you know, it's a good foreshadow of what to expect, but you don't really know who they are yet or why they're in the book yet, but it makes sense later. And so they talk a little bit about plutonium, and then that is important later on. So then the book first starts by showing you a dream that Mike, also known as Miracleman, is having, and then it's just shows kind of what happened in the mission that he went on with his family, and I think that was pretty interesting because later it explains more about that. And so then he wakes up with a headache, and he's not so sure why he has a headache, but he's like, no, I'm still going to go to work, and his wife is kind of like, no, are you sure you want to go to work? Because it sounds like she's the breadwinner, she makes the money in the family, and he's not comfortable with that, so he kind of explains, no, I still need to go to work. And so then this whole day, he kind of has a headache, and then he's going to work, and then the robbers come from earlier, and it's like, he's just kind of like, oh, I saw the headache, but then they try to rob of some plutonium, and he's like, eventually, it all starts to make sense why he has a headache, because he starts thinking back to his dream, where he's thinking about snow, because there was some snow in the dream. But let me talk about this illustration real quick, because this illustration, I think, does a good job of showing his transformation from Mike to the Miracleman, and how he, you know, the sound effects and all of the things that would normally be shown in a transformation. And I think that's an interesting illustration, the colors and all that. And so then an important word in his dream that he remembers is komota. And I think if you read that backwards, it's atomic. And that is important too, because it's about, there's an atomic bomb later on. That's interesting. And so when he says it, he then turns into Miracleman. And then basically there's this scene on page 18 where he is fully transformed, and then he talks about how he's not human because he's now transformed, and the robber is scared because they don't really know what he is yet, and why is he smiling while getting shot, you know. And then there's another interesting illustration down here where he's burning, or he burns one of the robbers, and I think that is a cool thing because they don't normally show that in some comics. I think it's a little graphic, but also, you know, more realistic, I think, because that's what would really happen in a real life situation if this ever were possible. And so that's it right there. And then later he starts to realize, you know, that he forgot he was Miracleman for a while, and now he's back as Miracleman. And then he goes home to his wife Liz, and he starts trying to explain. Well, at first she's scared because, you know, who is this guy, you know, coming home? It doesn't really look like him, or it looks like him, but just younger and a little bit taller. And so she's like, who are you? Why are you here? And then he kind of starts to explain, like, no, it's still me. I'm Miracleman. And so he's like, he starts explaining the story to her on how he became to be Mike after all these years of being Miracleman. And then he kind of starts to explain how it happened and why that dream ties back to who he is and how he became Mike. And then she's just kind of laughing at him, not really believing him because it's kind of unrealistic, you know, and she's just like, really, like, what's the real story? And then, you know, she kind of jokes a little with him about that, and so I think that shows she has a good humor, maybe not to him, because he doesn't like how she's kind of mocking him a little bit and not taking him too serious, even though he's telling the truth, as we know. And so then he starts to explain more to her that night when he switched from Miracleman to Mike and how that happened. Basically, what he explained was they went on this mission to go see a spaceship, and then there was snow and a bomb, an atomic bomb, which ties in from earlier. And then he's kind of like explaining that to her, and she's still like, this is not really too realistic to me. And so then what happens is he starts explaining how he has this whole family, which is
Diggy Dauntless.
And Johnny Bates, right? Thank you. And then, so what happens is they all go to explore this mission, this family, and then the bomb explodes.
Yep.
Right. The bomb explodes right here. An atomic bomb explodes. And so then what happens is they all switch back, but not really, because what happens is Dickie kind of, when he's going back to transformation, it kind of gets messed up, and so then some parts of him are like sticking out and some are just a little messed up, as you can see right here. It's like his leg, and then it's just all confusing. And then Miracleman changes back into a human, Mike, and then gets married and starts living as a human after all those years of being a superhero. And then Johnny Bates switched back also into a human, but we'll get into that later. And so then in chapter 4, he gets a call from Johnny Bates, and he remembers, he starts to remember him and remembering what happened, and then he goes to visit his empire, which is Sunburst, right? It's an electronic company. And so then, while they're walking up, there are these, like, he thinks it's going to be a nice day, but then around the building there are these dark clouds surrounding, which is very eerie. Which is very eerie, and also explaining what's going to happen later, foreshadowing. And so then they walk up, and they see Johnny Bates, and he's right here, and he looks like he's kind of towering over Mike. He looks pretty tall and big. And so then they just start talking. He explains how he founded his company and all of that, and that this happened in he founded this company in about 7 years. Like, within 7 years, his company was doing phenomenally, as he said. And so then he made a lot of money, and it went well. And so then eventually what happens is he asks Liz if they can talk alone, and so then they go outside and they start talking, or they were outside and Liz leaves, and they start talking, and then Johnny Bates is trying to convince him that he really is this company leader, and then Mike is not really buying it. He's kind of suspicious. He's like, oh, I wanted to believe you. I tried to believe you, but I just don't believe you. I don't think you ever turned back. And then he's like, no, he tries to, you know, manipulate Mike and say, no, I really did. This happened. All this is true. And then eventually he's like, Mike says, I know what I need to do. And so then he pushes him off the balcony, which is a kind of extreme thing to do if you're not really sure, but he must have been pretty sure. And then as he pushes him off the balcony, Liz walks out and she says, oh, we need to get the car or else we're gonna get a ticket. And so then, as you can see in this, he's pushing him off. And so then Liz is like, oh my god, what are you doing pushing him off the balcony? You just killed him probably. And so then we see that Johnny Bates actually comes up, and he never changed back, you know? He's the same miracle. What was his?
Kid Miracleman.
Kid Miracleman. And so he was him all along, and he never switched back, and that's why earlier he was so big, and he never really, you know, he had all of this power that he always had, and that's probably what helped him start his company and make so much money in only 7 years, which is not what maybe a normal human could do that, but it's just unrealistic. And so, yeah, that's pretty much the end of that. But I think, to wrap it up, there was an overall good story, and I think the illustrations, like this one and earlier in the book, really tie in nicely with the story that Alan Moore is trying to tell us and explain. Like, I think this is another good illustration, like I said earlier, and I think him using the word Komoda as his transformation into Miracleman is interesting because, you know, of the atomic bomb and all that. And then lastly, I think him putting Johnny Bates, Kid Miracleman, as, you know, he looks a lot taller and bigger than Mike here, and I think that's interesting because it shows the the height difference, shows that, you know, he was always bigger than him, and it just wasn't obvious yet. So then, yeah, I think that's a very interesting way to explain the story, and how Liz, you know, she's not a huge part of it, but she does play a nice part in making it kind of humoristic, and she kind of jokes a lot throughout the book. And then Mike is an interesting character as well, because he kind of wants her to take it more seriously, and then she's kind of just joking about it. And then he's a smart man, I think. You know, he figures out that Johnny Bates is not who he is, and it's very interesting to me.